Tayana's hands trembled as she balanced the plastic bag against her hip, fumbling for her phone to check the apartment code one more time. The January wind cut through her coat, making her eyes water, but she barely noticed. Inside the bag, a bottle of expensive champagne clinked against a container of tekkbokki from Marcus's favorite street card in Hongdae. Tomorrow would mark exactly 1 year since they'd met at the language exchange meetup in Itaewon, where she'd been practicing her Korean and he'd been showing off his English to impress the foreign girls. She smiled at the memory as she punched in the code. The door to Marcus's luxury apartment in Gangnam clicked open, and warmth rushed out to greet her. He'd given her the code 3 months ago, calling it our future home, even though she still lived in a cramped studio in Nowon that she shared with 2 other international students. She'd been saving every one from her part-time job at the university cafe and her evening gig teaching English at a hagwon, scrimping and sacrificing to contribute to their wedding fund, while Marcus, who worked at his uncle's import-export company, handled what he called the bigger expenses. The apartment was quiet when she stepped inside, slipping off her shoes in the Genkan. Too quiet. She'd texted him an hour ago saying she'd finished early and wanted to surprise him, but he hadn't responded. That wasn't unusual. Marcus often got caught up in work calls or gaming sessions with his friends and forgot to check his phone. She'd learned not to take it personally, even though it stung sometimes when she saw him glued to his screen, thumbs flying, clearly very capable of responding to someone. "Marcus," she called out softly, not wanting to startle him if he was on a work call. No response. The living room lights were dimmed, but the floor-to-ceiling windows let in enough ambient glow from Seoul's nightscape to see by. She noticed his Oxford shirt draped over the back of a chair, his belt on the floor near the hallway. Her stomach tightened with a strange premonition, but she pushed it down. Maybe he'd just gotten home and was changing. Maybe he was in the shower. Then she heard it. A soft laugh. Female. Light, flirtatious, completely unfamiliar. Tayana's fingers tightened around the plastic bag handles until they cut into her palm. She told herself it could be his cousin, or maybe a female coworker who'd stopped by. Marcus had plenty of colleagues. This was fine. Everything was fine. But her feet carried her forward anyway, around the corner into the living room. And that's when her entire world shattered into a million irreparable pieces. On the white leather sofa, the one they'd picked out together during a Sunday afternoon at Hyundai department store, the one where she'd imagined their future children playing, Marcus was tangled with another woman. Her red silk dress was pulled on the floor alongside his discarded clothes. The woman's manicured nails, painted a deep burgundy, dug into Marcus's bare back as they kissed with the desperate, consuming hunger of new lovers who couldn't get enough of each other. The champagne bottle slipped from Tayana's fingers. It exploded against the hardwood floor in a spray of glass and golden liquid that spread across the expensive wood like spilled blood. The sound shattered the intimate bubble around the couple on the couch. Marcus jerked upright, eyes going wide with shock and something that might have been fear. "Tay." The woman sat up slowly, making no effort whatsoever to cover herself. She had that effortless Korean beauty that Tayana had always felt compared to: porcelain skin, delicate features, the kind of straight, shiny black hair that looked perfect even disheveled. She looked Tayana over once, with an expression of such casual dismissal that it hurt more than any words could have, then turned to Marcus with an actual pout on her lips. "Baby, you said she'd be at work all night," the woman said in Korean, her voice carrying a whiny, affected tone that made Tayana's skin crawl. The world tilted on its axis. Tayana couldn't breathe. Her chest felt like someone had reached inside and crushed her lungs between their fists. Every sacrifice, every moment she'd ignored her instincts, every time she'd convinced herself that the weird feeling in her gut was just insecurity, it all came crashing down at once. She'd scrimped for months, eating instant ramen for dinner and walking instead of taking the subway to save money. Also, she could contribute to their wedding fund. She'd ignored the late nights when Marcus claimed he was at client dinners, but came home smelling like perfume and alcohol. She believed him when he said her being black didn't matter to his traditional Korean family, even though he'd been putting off introducing her to them for almost a year, always saying next month, or after the next holiday, or once I get my promotion. She'd been a complete and utter fool. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, if you love drama, romance, and jaw-dropping twists that'll have you on the edge of your seat, Do me a huge favor and smash that subscribe button right now. Seriously, hit it. Hit the like button too, and drop a comment telling me what you would do if you caught your fiancé cheating like this. Would you confront them? Walk away? Something else? Let me know. Now let's get back to Tayana's story because trust me, things are about to get absolutely wild. Don't, Tayana whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice when Marcus scrambled off the couch and reached for his pants. Just don't. Tay. Wait. I can explain, Marcus started, but his words sounded hollow and far away, like he was speaking to her from the bottom of a well. Explain what? Tayana heard herself say, surprised by how steady her voice sounded when everything inside her was screaming. Explain how you've been sleeping with her? Explain how many times you've lied to me? Explain how stupid I've been. The woman on the couch made a small sound of annoyance and reached for her dress, finally showing some modicum of shame, though Tayana suspected it was more irritation at having her evening interrupted than actual remorse. Marcus took a step toward her, pants halfway on, chest still bare. It's not what you think. It just happened, okay? It didn't mean anything. I love you, Tay. I want to marry you. This was just what? Tayana's voice rose, surprising even herself. Just a mistake? Just one time? Don't lie to me anymore, Marcus. I'm so tired of the lies. She could see the truth written all over his face, in the way his eyes shifted away from hers, in the defensive set of his shoulders, in the way the woman was now checking her phone casually, as if this was a minor inconvenience rather than the complete destruction of Tayana's life. How long? Tayana demanded. Tay. How long? Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd once found endearing, but now just looked like manipulation. A few months. But baby, it's ending. I was going to tell her tonight that it's over. That's why she's here. The woman's head snapped up at that, her expression showing genuine surprise and anger for the first time. She said something rapid-fire in Korean that Tayana's still-developing language skills couldn't quite catch, but the tone was clear. Marcus had been lying to both of them. Tayana backed toward the door, tears burning her eyes but refusing to fall. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I'm done, she said quietly. We're done. Keep the ring. She'd taken it off at work because the cafe's health inspector had been doing rounds, and she didn't want to risk losing it in dishwater. Now she was grateful she didn't have to throw it at him or leave it behind in some dramatic gesture. It just simply wouldn't go back on her finger. Ever. Tayana, please. Marcus called her name as she turned and ran, but she was already out the door, down the hallway, jabbing frantically at the elevator button with shaking hands. She burst out into Seoul's freezing January night and just walked. She had no destination, no plan, just an overwhelming need to move, to put distance between herself and the sight of Marcus with someone else. The tteokbokki container was still clutched in her hand, like some pathetic symbol of her naivety. She'd been bringing him his favorite food while he'd been. No, she couldn't think about it. The streets of Gangnam blurred past her in a haze of neon lights and endless streams of people who all seemed to have somewhere to be, someone to be with. Couples walked hand in hand, bundled against the cold. Groups of friends stumbled out of Noribang joints, laughing and singing. Everyone belonged somewhere except her. She found herself near Gangnam Station, in a side street where Pojangmaka, those iconic orange-tinted street food stalls, glowed like beacons against the darkness. She stumbled toward the nearest one and collapsed onto a plastic stool, fishing out what little cash she had left in her wallet. Soju, she said to the ajumma running the stall, holding up one finger to indicate she wanted a bottle. The elderly woman gave her a sympathetic look that suggested she'd seen plenty of heartbroken souls find their way to her tent over the years, and set down a bottle of the clear liquid along with a small glass. Tayana poured with shaking hands and drank half the bottle in 3 burning gulps that made her eyes water and her throat burn. She welcomed the pain. It was better than the ache in her chest. Rough night. The voice came from beside her, deep and smooth, with an accent that suggested soul born and raised. Tayana turned her head, vision already slightly blurred from the soju on an empty stomach, and found herself looking at a man who had just slid onto the plastic stool next to hers without asking permission. He was tall. She could tell even with him sitting down, with broad shoulders that filled out his expensive-looking black wool coat perfectly. His hair was styled back from his face, revealing sharp cheekbones and a jawline that could cut glass. His eyes were dark and intense, studying her with an unnerving focus that made her feel like he could see straight through to her soul. A thin scar cut through his left eyebrow, giving him a dangerous edge that should have made her nervous but somehow didn't. Even in her emotionally devastated state, Tiana couldn't help but notice that this man radiated power. It was in the way he moved, the way he carried himself, the way the other patrons at nearby tents suddenly found their food absolutely fascinating and avoided looking in their direction. He signaled the Ajumma for another bottle of soju and 2 shot glasses without waiting for Tiana to respond to his question. "You're crying in public," he said, his tone matter-of-fact rather than judgmental. "In this neighborhood, that's either very brave or very stupid." Tiana laughed, a broken sound that came out more like a sob. "Probably both." He poured soju into both glasses with practiced ease and pushed one toward her. She drank it without hesitation, no longer caring about drinking with strangers or making smart decisions. Smart decisions had gotten her exactly nowhere. "Bad day?" he asked, his dark eyes never leaving her face. "Bad life?" she muttered, staring at the empty shot glass. He studied her for a long moment, and Tiana was acutely aware of what she must look like. Probably a mess, with tear-streaked makeup, wearing her cafe uniform under her coat, smelling like coffee and fried food and heartbreak. "I'm Min Woo," he said finally, as if he'd made some kind of decision. "Tiana," she replied automatically, her tongue already loosened by alcohol and emotional exhaustion. Min Woo nodded slowly, as if filing her name away in some important mental folder. "You look like someone who just lost everything." The observation was so accurate, so painfully on point, that Tiana felt tears spring to her eyes again. "I did," she whispered. He leaned back slightly, the movement making his expensive watch catch the light from the Pojangmaka's hanging bulbs. The watch alone probably cost more than her entire year's rent. "Then maybe," he said slowly, deliberately, "it's time you gained something better." Tiana frowned through her soju-induced haze. "What's that supposed to mean?" Min Woo's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, more like the promise of one. "Marry me." She choked on the soju she'd just sipped, coughing and sputtering. When she could breathe again, she stared at him. "You're insane." "Probably," he agreed easily, not looking the least bit offended. "But I'm also serious." "You don't even know me," Tiana pointed out, wondering if this was some kind of elaborate prank or if she'd somehow fallen asleep on the subway and was having the world's most bizarre dream. "I know enough," Min Woo said, his gaze locked on hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're alone. You're hurt. You're beautiful when you're angry." He paused. "And I need a wife tonight. You need a new life tonight." It seems like a fair exchange. This is absolutely insane, right? But wait until you hear why Min Woo needs a wife so desperately and what he's really offering Tiana. Keep watching because this is where everything changes. And if you're hooked, I know you are, hit that like button right now so the algorithm knows you're loving this story. Tiana stared at this stranger who'd just proposed marriage like he was asking her to pass the kimchi. Any sane, rational person would have gotten up and walked away. Would have called him crazy and found a different Pojangmaka. Would have at least asked more questions. But Tiana had spent the last year being sane and rational. She'd been the perfect girlfriend, patient and understanding, never making waves. Always accommodating Marcus's schedule and his family's expectations, and his need to keep her hidden away like a shameful secret. And where had that gotten her? To a street tent, drinking alone, with the image of her fiancé tangled up with another woman burned into her brain. "Why would someone like you need a wife in one night?" she heard herself ask instead of running away like she should have. Min Woo's expression darkened just for a second, a flash of something dangerous crossing his features before his controlled mask slipped back into place. "Because tomorrow, my enemies will try to take everything I've built. An unexpected marriage complicates their plans." He paused, watching her reaction carefully. "A foreign wife? That complicates them even more." The Ajumma brought another bottle unasked, and Min Woo paid with a bill that was far too large for the purchase, waving away the change. The elderly woman scurried off, clearly wanting no part of whatever conversation was happening at her tent. Tiana's journalism training. She was a semester away from her degree at Korea University, kicked in despite the alcohol and heartbreak. Enemies? What kind of enemies? The kind that don't ask politely, Min Woo replied cryptically. He leaned forward, elbows on the small table, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woody that was nothing like Marcus's drugstore body spray. I'm going to be honest with you, Tiana. Tomorrow night, there are people who plan to kill me and take over my business operations. Marriage changes the optics. It suggests stability, legacy, succession. It makes them hesitate. His dark eyes bore into hers. And in my world, the person who hesitates first is the person who loses. Your world, Tiana repeated slowly. What exactly is your world? Instead of answering directly, Min-woo pulled out his phone and showed her a news article. The headline was in Korean, but she'd gotten good enough over the past 2 years to read it. Kim Min-woo, reclusive business tycoon, expands operations despite controversy. The photo showed the same man sitting across from her, but in a tailored suit, shaking hands with what looked like a government official. He looked every inch the legitimate businessman, but there was something in his eyes even in the photograph, a hardness, a warning. I control a significant portion of souls. Let's call it shadow economy, Min-woo said quietly, pocketing his phone. Import-export, entertainment venues, real estate, security services. Some of it's perfectly legal. Some of it operates in the gray areas. And some of it, he shrugged. Some of it would get me arrested if I didn't have the right people in the right positions. Tiana should have been terrified. This man was essentially admitting to being involved in organized crime. But instead, she felt a strange, reckless thrill run through her. Maybe it was the soju. Maybe it was the heartbreak. Maybe it was the fact that for the first time in a year, someone was being completely honest with her about who they were and what they wanted. So I'd be a shield, she said flatly. A human shield to keep you alive. You'd be a complication, Min-woo corrected. A beautiful, unexpected complication that throws my rivals off balance and buys me time to consolidate my position. He poured another shot for each of them. But I won't lie to you. Yes, there's danger. There will always be danger around me. However, I protect what's mine. Always. Absolutely. Without exception. That word, mine should have raised red flags. Should have sent her running. Instead, it sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. What's in it for me? Tiana heard herself ask. Besides the obvious, not being alone and heartbroken part, Min-woo's lips curved into a real smile this time, transforming his face from dangerous to devastatingly handsome. Money. More than you've ever seen. Protection. No one will ever hurt you again. A home. He paused. Revenge, if you want it. And me. The way he said that last word made heat pool in Tiana's stomach despite everything. I don't know you, she said, but her protest sounded weak even to her own ears. You'll have a lifetime to get to know me, Min-woo replied. Starting tonight. This was insane. This was absolutely, completely, totally insane. Tiana had always been the responsible one, the one who planned everything out, who made lists and studied hard and followed the rules. And where had that gotten her? She looked down at her left hand, at the pale line where Marcus's ring had sat for 6 months. She thought about going back to her cramped studio, to her 2 roommates who'd probably already heard through the international student grapevine about Marcus's cheating. She thought about facing everyone at school, at work, all the pitying looks and whispered conversations. Or she could do something completely insane. She could marry a stranger. She could step into a world she knew nothing about. She could stop being careful, responsible Tiana who always did the right thing and never made waves. The rational part of her brain, the part that sounded like her mother back in Atlanta, screamed that this was dangerous and stupid and potentially life-threatening. But the broken part of her, the part that was so tired of being overlooked and underestimated and betrayed, whispered, why not? What do you have to lose? Tiana met Min-woo's intense gaze and felt something shift inside her chest. Something that felt like power, like choice, like finally taking control of her own story. Fine, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Let's get married. If Min-woo was surprised by her acceptance, he didn't show it. He simply stood in one fluid motion, reaching out his hand to her. His palm was warm when she took it, slightly rough with calluses that suggested he did more than just sit behind a desk giving orders. You won't regret this, he said quietly. I already regret everything else, Tiana replied. Might as well regret something interesting. That earned her another one of those almost smiles that transformed his face. Come on, then. We have a wedding to get to. A sleek black Genesis G90 slid to the curb as if summoned by telepathy. The driver, a stocky man built like a wall, with the kind of alert posture that screamed military or security training, hopped out and opened the rear door without a word. Minwoo guided Tiana inside with a hand on the small of her back, the touch somehow both possessive and protective. The door shut behind them with a heavy, expensive thud that felt final, like she'd just stepped through a portal into a different world. The interior of the car smelled like leather and sandalwood and money. The seats were heated, warming her frozen body. Through the partition, she could see the driver's eyes in the rearview mirror, carefully not looking at her, focused completely on the road. Where are we going? Tiana asked, her voice sounding small in the hushed interior. To get married, Minwoo replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to get married at. She checked the dashboard clock, nearly 1 in the morning. She laughed, and there was definitely an edge of hysteria in it now that the shock was wearing off and reality was creeping back in. It's past midnight. Nothing's open. You can't just. Everything I need is open. Minwoo interrupted quietly, with the kind of certainty that came from never hearing the word no. They drove through Seoul's glittering streets, past department stores and Noribang joints and 24-hour convenience stores, heading away from the chaos of Gangnam toward the quieter government district. Tiana watched the city flow past the tinted windows and wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life or somehow, impossibly, the best decision. The car finally stopped in front of a side entrance to what looked like a district government office. A lone security guard stood beside a lit doorway, looking completely unsurprised to see them despite the ungodly hour. Minwoo got out first, then turned to offer his hand. Tiana hesitated on the leather seat. This was it. Her last chance to back out, to tell the driver to take her back to her studio, to wake up tomorrow and deal with her broken engagement like a normal person. Instead, she took Minwoo's hand and stepped out into her new life. Don't go anywhere because we're about to witness the most unconventional wedding ceremony in Seoul's history, and trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. If you're still watching, drop a comment and tell me, is Tiana making the right choice? And make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. The security guard bowed deeply as they approached, murmuring Minwoo in a tone of deep respect mixed with something that might have been fear. He held the door open, and they stepped into fluorescent-lit hallways that smelled like government buildings everywhere, cleaning solution, old paper, and bureaucracy. Their footsteps echoed on polished floors as Minwoo led her through the maze of corridors with the confidence of someone who'd walked this path before. Tiana's heart hammered so hard she was sure he could hear it. They stopped in front of an office where lights spilled out from under the door. Minwoo knocked once and entered without waiting for a response. A middle-aged clerk sat behind a desk, looking tired but alert, with neat stacks of papers already prepared in front of him. He stood and bowed when they entered, adjusting his glasses. Kim Minwoo, he greeted, his eyes flicking briefly to Tiana before carefully looking away. Everything is ready as you requested. Minwoo reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a thick envelope, setting it on the desk without a word. The clerk took it with a small nod, tucking it into a drawer without checking the contents. Tiana didn't need to be a genius to know that envelope contained enough cash to make a bureaucrat willing to perform a marriage ceremony in the middle of the night, no questions asked. The documents, Minwoo said. The clerk slid a marriage registration form across the desk. Tiana stared at it, her vision swimming slightly, whether from soju or shock, she couldn't tell. Her name was already typed in perfect Hangul and English, Tiana Michelle Brooks. And beside it, Kim Minwoo. How did you, she started. Your student ID was visible in your coat pocket at the Pojangmaka, Minwoo said quietly. I'm observant. That should have been creepy. Instead, Tiana found it oddly reassuring that he paid attention to details. In her world, that level of attention might be unsettling. In his world, she suspected it was survival. The clerk cleared his throat gently. If you would both please sign here, and here, and here. He indicated with a pen. Minwoo signed first, his signature a bold, elegant slash of ink that spoke of confidence and practice. Then he handed the pen to Tiana. Her hand trembled as she took it. This was real. This was actually happening. One signature, and her entire life would change. No more Marcus. No more struggling to pay rent on her studio. No more being the foreign girlfriend kept hidden from family and friends. But also no more control, no more independence, no more plans for the future she'd carefully crafted. She thought about Marcus's face when he'd looked up from that couch. The guilt had been there, yes, but underneath it had been something worse, relief. Relief at being caught, at not having to hide anymore, at being free of the burden of a girlfriend who didn't fit neatly into his world. Tiana pressed the pen to paper and signed her name. The clerk stamped the document with official-looking seals, each thump of the stamp sounding like a heartbeat. By the authority vested in me by the Seoul Metropolitan Government, I declare you legally married. His tone was completely flat, as if he performed midnight marriages for mysterious men and heartbroken women every week. And just like that, Tiana Brooks became Tiana Kim. Minwoo reached into his pocket again and pulled out 2 plain gold bands. They weren't flashy or diamond-encrusted, just simple, heavy gold rings that looked expensive in their simplicity. He took her left hand, his touch gentle despite the calluses on his palms, and slid one ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. She realized with a start that he must have noticed her ring size too, somehow, during their brief interaction at the Pojangmaka. Tiana took the other ring with shaking fingers and slid it onto his hand. His fingers were long and elegant, but she could feel the strength in them, the barely contained power. The clerk produced a camera and took a photo for official records, both of them looking slightly shell-shocked. Tiana still in her cafe uniform and winter coat, Minwoo in his expensive black wool coat. Not exactly the wedding photos she'd imagined as a little girl. "Congratulations," the clerk said in that same monotone. "You may now kiss." Minwoo looked at her, a question in his dark eyes. Tiana nodded, not trusting her voice. He cupped her face in both hands, thumbs brushing her cheekbones, and kissed her softly. It was nothing like the desperate, passionate kisses she'd witnessed earlier between Marcus and his lover. This was gentle, almost reverent, a promise sealed with lips and breath. When he pulled back, Tiana felt dizzy, and she didn't think it was from the soju anymore. "Let's go home," Minwoo said, taking her hand. Home, the word should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like something she'd been searching for without knowing it. Back in the car, Tiana stared at the ring on her finger, watching it catch the light from passing street lamps. Her husband, was checking messages on his phone, his expression unreadable in the shadows. "Where is home?" she asked finally. Minwoo looked up from his phone. "Pyeongchangdong, the hills above the city. Of course, one of Seoul's most expensive neighborhoods, where celebrities and business moguls built fortress-like mansions away from the chaos below." They drove in silence, climbing winding roads that took them higher and higher above the glittering city. Finally, they passed through heavy gates that opened automatically, manned by security guards who bowed as the car passed. The house, no, mansion, was a stunning combination of modern architecture and traditional Korean elements. All glass and steel and dark wood, perched on the edge of a cliff with what must be spectacular views of Seoul below. The car stopped under a covered portico. This time, Minwoo got out first and came around to open her door himself, offering his hand like an old-fashioned gentleman. A woman in a neat uniform appeared at the entrance, bowing deeply. She looked to be in her 50s, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. "This is Mrs. Kong," Minwoo said. "She manages the house and staff." "Mrs. Kong, this is my wife, Tiana." If Mrs. Kong was surprised by the sudden appearance of a foreign wife in the middle of the night, she hit it perfectly. She bowed to Tiana. "Welcome home, madam. I've prepared the guest suite for you." Tiana was too exhausted to protest the guest suite designation. She followed Mrs. Kong through a stunning entry hall, up a sweeping staircase, and down a hallway to a set of double doors. The suite was larger than her entire studio apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over Seoul's nightscape. A king-sized bed dominated one wall, dressed in what looked like silk sheets. There was a sitting area, a work desk, and doors that led to what she assumed was a bathroom. "I've laid out some clothes for you," Mrs. Kong said, gesturing to the bed where soft pajamas were folded neatly. "The bathroom is stocked with toiletries. If you need anything at all, just press the button by the bed, and someone will come." Tiana wanted to ask how there were clothes in her size, how Mrs. Kong had known to prepare a room, how any of this was possible. But exhaustion was crashing over her in waves now that the adrenaline was fading. "Thank you," she managed. Mrs. Kong bowed and left, closing the doors softly behind her. Alone for the first time since the Pojangmaka, Tiana sank down onto the bed and finally let herself cry. Great, racking sobs that shook her whole body, releasing all the pain and betrayal and fear and confusion of the past few hours. She cried for the relationship she'd lost, for the dreams she'd had that would never come true. She cried for the girl she'd been this morning, who'd thought her biggest problem was deciding which flavor of coffee to recommend to customers. She cried for her mother, thousands of miles away in Atlanta, who would be horrified and terrified when she found out what her daughter had done. And when she was finally empty, cried out and hollow, she stripped off her cafe uniform and stood under a shower hot enough to turn her skin pink, washing away the smell of coffee and fried food in Marcus's apartment. The pajamas Mrs. Kong had left were butter-soft and fit perfectly. Of course they did. Minwoo seemed to be a man who planned for every contingency. Tiana crawled between silk sheets that felt like luxury against her skin, expecting to lie awake all night replaying every insane decision she'd made. Instead, she fell asleep almost instantly, her body and mind finally surrendering to exhaustion. She woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize, in a bed she'd never slept in before, wearing pajamas that weren't hers. For one blissful moment, she thought it had all been a dream. The cheating, the Pojangmaka, the midnight marriage. Then she saw the gold band on her left hand and remembered everything. Tiana sat up, heart racing. What had she done? What had she done? She'd married a complete stranger who'd admitted to being involved in organized crime. She didn't know his favorite color or his birthday, or if he preferred coffee or tea. She didn't know if he was kind or cruel, if he'd keep his promises, or if this was all some elaborate scheme. A soft knock on the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Come in," she called, pulling the covers up. Mrs. Kong entered with a tray laden with breakfast. Perfectly cooked eggs, fresh fruit arranged artfully, toast that smelled like it had just come from the oven, and an Americano that looked professionally made. "Good morning, madam," Mrs. Kong said warmly, setting the tray on a side table. "I hope you slept well. Mr. Kim asks that you join him downstairs in his office when you're ready. There's no rush." Tiana's stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since, she couldn't even remember. "Yesterday afternoon?" "Thank you, Mrs. Kong." The housekeeper bowed and left. Tiana devoured the breakfast, trying not to think too hard about how the coffee was made exactly how she liked it. Lots of cream, one sugar. More of Minwoo's observation skills, she supposed. After eating, she investigated the closet and found it fully stocked with clothes in her size. Designer labels she recognized from window shopping in Gangnam, but could never afford. She chose simple black slacks and a cream-colored sweater, both of which fit like they'd been tailored for her. Everything fit. Everything was perfect. It should have been comforting. Instead, it was vaguely unsettling. This evidence of Minwoo's thoroughness, his ability to arrange things exactly as he wanted them. Tiana made her way downstairs, following the sound of voices speaking in rapid Korean. She found Minwoo in a home office that overlooked the ocean, because of course this cliffside mansion had ocean views. He was dressed casually in dark slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that suggested he spent time in the gym. He looked up when she entered, his dark eyes sweeping over her in a way that made her acutely aware of how the sweater fit. "Good morning," he said. "Sleep well." "Like the dead," Tiana admitted. "Good." He stood, and she noticed he was still wearing the wedding band. For some reason, that made this feel more real than the certificate had. "We need to talk. There are things you should know." He led her to a sunlit living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul. Two men waited there, both in suits, both radiating the same controlled danger as Minwoo. One had a jagged scar running down his left cheek that suggested a knife fight. The other wore glasses and carried a tablet, looking more like an accountant than a criminal, but Tiana wasn't fooled by appearances anymore. "My lieutenants," Minwoo said. Jae-sung, he indicated the scarred man, and Hyun-suk, the one with glasses. "They need to understand who you are now." Both men bowed to her, deeper than was strictly polite, and murmured, "Madam." Minwoo's voice changed, taking on an edge of steel that made Tiana's spine straighten. As of last night, Tiana is my wife. That makes her untouchable. Anyone who disrespects her answers to me. Anyone who threatens her." He paused, letting the silence speak for him. "Disappears. Is that absolutely clear?" "Yes, Hyungnam," both men said in unison. Hyungnam. Tiana's Korean was good enough to know that was the term of respect used for mafia bosses. Her heart started to pound. Minwoo turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "Your old life ends today? Phone, bank accounts, apartment. Hyunsuk will handle closing everything quietly. You'll have new phone, new cards, new accounts by this afternoon." Tiana's independent streak flared. "I can handle my own." "I know you're independent," Minwoo interrupted, but not unkindly. "I respect that about you. But you married into a war, Tiana. My rivals have been planning a move for weeks. Your sudden existence throws them completely off balance. That buys us time, but only if you're fully protected. Your old phone can be tracked. Your old accounts can be monitored. Everything from your previous life is a potential vulnerability now." The reality of what she'd done was crashing over her in waves. "What kind of war?" she asked, sinking onto the sleek sofa. Minwoo sat across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "The kind where people die if I lose. I control ports, nightclubs, construction contracts. Half of Seoul's shadow economy flows through my operations. The other half belongs to rival families who want it all." He met her eyes steadily. "Marriage signals stability. It suggests succession planning, legacy, family. It makes my rivals hesitate before striking. A married man is harder to eliminate cleanly than a bachelor with no heirs. So I'm a shield," Tiana said flatly, even though he'd explained this last night. Somehow it felt different in the cold light of day. "You're a weapon," Minwoo corrected. "A strategic advantage. And I'll teach you how to use that power." His phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Marcus is downstairs," he said, looking back at her. "He's been here since dawn, begging to see you." Ice flooded Tiana's veins. "What? He tracked your location somehow. Probably that friend finder app you have on your phone. My security team picked him up at the gates." Minwoo watched her carefully. "Do you want to see him?" Every rational part of Tiana screamed no. She wanted to forget Marcus existed, to never see his face again. But the hurt, angry part of her, the part that was tired of being dismissed and overlooked, whispered yes. She stood up, surprised by how steady her voice was. "Take me to him." Something flashed in Minwoo's eyes. Pride, maybe. Or approval. "As you wish, wife." "Oh, this confrontation is going to be epic. If you're loving this story and want to see Marcus get what's coming to him, smash that like button and drop a comment. And subscribe if you haven't already, because this is just the beginning." Minwoo led her down a wide corridor lined with modern art that probably cost more than most people's houses. Tiana's new heels, Mrs. Kong had left several pairs in the closet, clicked authoritatively against the polished floors. She'd chosen them deliberately, wanting the extra height, the extra confidence. They descended a glass staircase into a sunken lounge area overlooking an indoor infinity pool that seemed to flow right into the view of Seoul beyond. It was architectural porn, the kind of space featured in luxury magazines. And there, in the middle of all that expensive beauty, stood Marcus. He looked terrible. His hair was disheveled, still wearing the same clothes from last night, but rumpled now, his eyes red-rimmed like he'd been crying. When he saw Tiana, his face crumpled with relief. "Tay. Thank God," he breathed, taking a step toward her. Jae-sung, the lieutenant with the scarred face, shifted his position almost imperceptibly, blocking Marcus's path without seeming to. The message was clear. You don't move unless we say you can move. Marcus's eyes darted to the imposing man, then to Minwoo standing protectively behind Tiana, then back to her face. "Tay, baby, I've been going crazy. I went to your studio, but your roommates said you never came home. I've been calling you, but your phone's off. I was so worried." "Don't," Tiana said quietly, surprised at the coldness in her own voice. "Don't call me baby. Don't pretend you were worried." Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she'd once found endearing but now just seemed manipulative. "I know you're upset about last night, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll tell my parents about us, I swear. Just come home with me and we'll talk." "Talk," Tiana repeated. "Like how you were going to talk to that woman. The one you've been sleeping with for months." Marcus flinched. His eyes flicked to Minwoo again, clearly uncomfortable having this conversation in front of an audience. Can we do this in private? Please. No, Minwoo said flatly. Anything you have to say to my wife, you can say in front of me. Marcus's face drained of color. Asterisk your wife? Asterisk. He stared at Tiana's left hand, at the gold band that had replaced his grandmother's ring. You're married? To him. His voice rose to nearly a shout. Hey, what the fuck? You can't be serious. You're not thinking straight. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in a year, Tiana interrupted. She was surprised at how calm she felt, how completely done. You cheated on me, Marcus. For months. You lied to me. You kept me hidden from your family because you were ashamed of me. That's not true. I was just waiting for the right time. There was never going to be a right time, Tiana said, finally understanding the truth. Your parents wanted you to marry a nice Korean girl from a good family. I was never going to be that. I was convenient. Someone to practice your English with. Someone who didn't demand too much. Someone who worked 2 jobs and paid her own way so you could save money. Marcus's face went red. That woman last night meant nothing. It was just physical. I love you, Tae. I want to marry you. We've been planning our future. You mean I was planning our future while you were planning your exit strategy? Tiana corrected. Tell me the truth, Marcus. When you got caught last night, part of you was relieved, wasn't it? Relieved that you didn't have to keep pretending anymore. He opened his mouth, closed it, and Tiana saw the truth in his eyes. She was right. I thought so, she said softly. Marcus's desperation ratcheted up. He dropped to his knees right there on the marble floor. Actual drop to his knees like something out of a K-drama. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. Please, Tae, give me another chance. I'll be better. I'll do anything. Minwoo's voice cut through the room like a blade. You had your chance. You spent it poorly. Marcus looked up at him with real fear flickering in his eyes. Who the hell are you? How do you even know her? Minwoo smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I'm her husband. I'm the man who saw her value when you treated her like an option. I'm the man who won't waste her time with lies and half measures. You don't even know her. Marcus scrambled to his feet, addressing Tiana now. He's using you. Everyone in Seoul knows Kim Minwoo. He's dangerous, Tae. He's involved in organized crime. People who cross him end up. He cut himself off, but the implication was clear. Dead. Minwoo supplied helpfully. Disappeared? Yes, sometimes. But I don't lie to my wife. I don't cheat on her. And I sure as hell don't make her work 2 jobs while I pretend she doesn't exist to my family. Tiana felt something shift in her chest. Pride, strength, the sense that for the first time in her adult life, someone was actually on her side, actually defending her worth. Tae, please. Marcus tried one more time, his voice breaking. Think about this. You're throwing away everything we built together. We didn't build anything, Tiana said. I built dreams, and you let me, knowing they'd never come true. I'm not throwing anything away, Marcus. I'm finally picking up something worth keeping. She turned to Minwoo. I'm done here. Minwoo nodded to Jae-sung. Escort him out. If he returns to this property, break something non-vital. The threat was delivered in the same tone someone might use to order coffee, but Marcus went pale. Jae-sung and another guard, when had he appeared, each took one of Marcus's arms and began walking him toward the exit. You'll regret this. Marcus shouted as they dragged him away. When he gets bored of you, when you realize what he is, you'll regret this. The heavy front door slammed shut, cutting off whatever else he was yelling. The silence that rushed back in was profound. Tiana's legs suddenly felt weak. She sank onto the nearest sofa, her whole body starting to shake as the adrenaline wore off. Minwoo crouched in front of her, his large hands settling gently on her knees. You okay? She laughed, a broken sound somewhere between a sob and genuine humor. I just watched my ex-fiancé get physically removed from my new husband's mansion by what I'm assuming are mafia enforcers. No, I'm not okay. His thumbs rubbed small circles on her knees, the gesture surprisingly comforting. You were magnificent. You didn't back down, didn't apologize, didn't make excuses. You stood your ground. Tiana looked at him, really looked at him. Up close, in the morning light, she could see the scar through his eyebrow was old, long healed. His eyes weren't pure black like she'd thought last night. They were deep brown with flecks of gold that caught the light. There were faint laugh lines at the corners, suggesting he smiled more than his serious demeanor suggested. Why are you really doing this? She whispered. There must be easier ways to complicate your enemy's plans. Minwoo was quiet for a long moment, his hands still on her knees, his gaze locked with hers. Last night at the Pojangmaka, I watched you drink soju like you were trying to drown something. I watched you cry without caring who saw. I watched you carry food for someone who didn't deserve your care. He paused. You reminded me of someone. Someone I failed to protect a long time ago. He didn't elaborate, and Tayana didn't push. They all had ghosts. I needed a wife, Minwoo continued. You needed a way out. It's a practical arrangement. But, he brushed a tear from her cheek that she hadn't realized had fallen. I don't make promises I can't keep. I won't cheat on you. I won't lie to you. And I will keep you safe. Always. Tayana found herself believing him. Maybe it was Stockholm Syndrome kicking in early. Maybe it was desperation. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the fact that he'd been more honest with her in 12 hours than Marcus had been in a year. Okay, she said softly. I believe you. Something shifted in Minwoo's expression, relief, maybe, or satisfaction. He stood, pulling her up with him. Come, let me show you something. He led her through a hidden door she hadn't noticed, behind a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf that swung open like something out of a spy movie. They descended in a private elevator, going down, 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 until the doors opened onto something out of a thriller film. A command center. Walls of monitors showed security feeds from all over Seoul. Warehouses, nightclubs, shipping yards, street corners. Maps covered one entire wall, marked with colored pins and strings connecting different locations like a detective's conspiracy board. Weapons were locked behind glass cases. Guns, knives, things Tayana didn't even have names for. 5 men snapped to attention when Minwoo entered, bowing deeply before returning to their monitoring stations. This is the heart of my operations, Minwoo said quietly, his hand resting on the small of her back. From here, I can see threats coming before they arrive. I can mobilize resources. I can protect what's mine. He walked to one of the monitors and pulled up footage. Tomorrow night, actually, tonight now, the Choi Syndicate plans to hit 3 of my warehouses simultaneously. They've been planning this for weeks, waiting for what they perceived as weakness. He tapped another screen. My father died last year. Heart attack, sudden, unexpected. I was his only child, but I was unmarried, no heirs, and at 29, my rivals saw me as young and untested. They thought grief would make me sloppy. They thought I'd be easy to topple. Minwoo turned to face her. Your marriage announcement went out 2 hours ago. Social registry updated, media alerted. By now, every family in Seoul's underworld knows that Kim Minwoo has taken a wife. A foreign wife, no less, which suggests I'm even more confident and unpredictable than they thought. He pulled out his phone and showed her a news alert. Reclusive tycoon Kim Minwoo surprises with unexpected marriage to American woman. The article featured a grainy photo clearly taken from surveillance cameras at the government office, showing them signing papers. Choi will hesitate now, Minwoo said. Not forever, but long enough for me to consolidate my defenses, shore up loyalties, maybe even turn some of his people to my side. In this world, Tayana, hesitation is death. The person who acts decisively wins. Tayana stared at the screens, at the maps, at the weapons. This is really your life. All of this. Yes, Minwoo said simply. I won't lie to you about what being married to me means. There will be danger. There will be violence. There will be times when you'll question whether you made the right choice. He turned her to face him, hands on her shoulders. But I swear to you, on my life, on everything I've built, I will protect you. My enemies might try to use you to get to me. That's why you need to be trained, protected, always aware. But I won't let anyone hurt you. Ever. The intensity in his voice made her believe him. Made her want to believe him. What do I have to do? She asked. Pride flashed in his eyes. For now, trust me. Learn. Let me teach you this world. He checked his watch. Expensive, understated, probably worth a car. Tonight, you're going to attend a club opening in Itaewon with Jae-sung and a security team. Be visible. Let Seoul see the new Mrs. Kim living her best life. Tayana's stomach dropped. While you do what? While I handle the Choi Syndicate's warehouse attack, he said matter-of-factly. If I stay home to protect my new bride, I look weak. But if I can handle business while my wife enjoys herself publicly, it sends a message. I'm so secure, so powerful, that I don't need to hover. My security is that good. My position is that strong. So I'm bait, Tiana said, though there was no heat in it now. She was starting to understand how this world worked. You're a statement, Minwoo corrected. And you'll be perfectly safe. I'm tripling your security detail. Jae-sung would die before letting anything happen to you, literally. He owes me his life several times over. He pulled her close, and Tiana was surprised to find herself leaning into him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. This is who I am, he murmured against her hair. This is the life you've married into. If it's too much, tell me now. I'll arrange for an annulment, set you up in a nice apartment, make sure you're taken care of. No judgment, no punishment. It was an out, an escape hatch, and it was so tempting. But Tiana thought about going back to her old life. Her cramped studio, her 2 jobs, the pitying looks from classmates who'd heard about Marcus. The safe, small existence where she made herself smaller and smaller to fit into other people's expectations. Where she could stay in this terrifying, exciting new world. With a husband who'd known her for less than 24 hours but defended her more fiercely than Marcus ever had in a year. I'm staying, she heard herself say. Teach me. Show me your world. I'm not backing down. Minwoo pulled back to look at her, and the smile that spread across his face transformed him from dangerous to breathtaking. That's my girl, he said and kissed her. This kiss was different from the gentle one at the government office. This was claiming, possessive, full of heat and promise. His hands threaded into her hair, angling her head exactly how he wanted it, and Tiana melted into him, her hands clutching his shoulders for balance. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Minwoo rested his forehead against hers. I have meetings all afternoon, he said regretfully. Mrs. Kong will help you prepare for tonight. I'll see you before you leave. Okay. Tiana managed, her lips still tingling. Back upstairs, Mrs. Kong was waiting with an efficiency that suggested she'd been monitoring the situation. Come, madam, she said kindly. We have much to do. The afternoon passed in a whirlwind. A stylist arrived with rolling racks of clothes. A makeup artist set up a portable station in Tiana's suite. Mrs. Kong brought snacks and tea, making sure Tiana stayed hydrated and fed throughout the transformation. By 6 p.m., Tiana barely recognized herself in the mirror. The dress was black with a thigh-high slit, elegant and sexy without being over the top. The makeup was dramatic, smoky eyes, perfect contouring, lips painted a deep red. Her hair fell in waves over one shoulder. She looked like she belonged in this world of money and power and danger. She looked like Mrs. Kim Minwoo. A knock on the door made her turn. Minwoo entered and froze when he saw her. He was dressed in a black suit with no tie, the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone, looking like every Korean drama villain fantasy come to life. But the way he was staring at her made heat pool in her stomach. Breathtaking, he said finally, his voice rough in a way that made her shiver. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and walked a slow circle around her, his gaze dragging over every inch like a physical touch. When he completed the circle, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a diamond choker necklace that probably cost more than her university tuition. May I? He asked. Tiana nodded, lifting her hair. Minwoo fastened the choker around her neck, his fingers brushing her nape and sending sparks down her spine. It's beautiful, she whispered. It's also a tracker, Minwoo said quietly, his breath warm against her ear. And there's a panic button hidden in the clasp. Press it for 3 seconds, and I'll know you're in trouble. I'll come for you. Doesn't matter what I'm doing. Doesn't matter who's trying to stop me. I will come for you. The intensity of the promise made her throat tight. She turned to face him. Be safe tonight, she said. Whatever you're doing, please be safe. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, that she was worried about him. Always, he murmured, and kissed her forehead. Now go show Seoul who you are. The club opening was at a massive venue in Itaewon, Seoul's international district. The place was packed with Korea's elite, celebrities, business executives, socialites, the kind of people who appeared in gossip magazines and lifestyle blogs. Tiana arrived with Jae-sung on one side and 2 other guards flanking her. Heads turned immediately. Whispers followed in her wake. Is that Kim Minwoo's wife? I heard he married some foreigner. She's stunning. Apparently, it was a whirlwind romance. Tiana held her head high, channeling every ounce of confidence she didn't quite feel. She was shown to a VIP booth with the best view of the DJ, bottles of expensive champagne already waiting. A procession of people came by to introduce themselves, to congratulate her on her marriage, to subtly, and not so subtly, try to get information. Tiana smiled and deflected, sipping champagne she couldn't taste, acutely aware of every minute ticking by. At 11:47 p.m., her phone buzzed. Minwoo ***, it's done. All warehouses secure. 3 of theirs won't see sunrise. Coming to get you. ***. Relief flooded through her so powerfully that her knees nearly buckled. He was safe. He was safe and coming for her. 20 minutes later, the crowd near the entrance parted like the Red Sea. Minwoo strode through the club like he owned it, which, Tiana suddenly realized, he probably did. There wasn't a speck of blood on him, not a hair out of place, but he radiated such barely controlled violence that people scrambled to get out of his way. He didn't stop until he reached her booth. Then, in front of everyone, he cupped her face in both hands and kissed her hard, claiming, possessive, desperate, like he'd been thinking about doing nothing else all night. The club erupted in whistles and cheers, but Tiana barely heard them. She was too focused on the way Minwoo was holding her like she was precious, like she was his, and he would fight anyone who suggested otherwise. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "Warehouse is secure," he murmured, just loud enough for her to hear over the music. "Choi lost 3 of his best lieutenants, trying to breach our defenses. The message has been sent." Tiana shivered, not entirely from fear. "And you? Are you hurt?" "Not a scratch," he said, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "Let's go home." In the car, Minwoo pulled her onto his lap without asking, his arms wrapping around her like steel bands. "You were perfect tonight," he said against her hair. "Jae-sung said you handled every conversation like you'd been doing this your whole life." Tiana had been terrified every second, but she didn't say that. Instead, she buried her face in Minwoo's neck, breathing in his scent, smoke and gunpowder tonight, underneath the cologne. "I was scared," she admitted. "I know," he said, his hand sliding up her thigh where the dress's slit fell open, stopping just short of indecent. The touch wasn't sexual, it was grounding, claiming, reassuring. "But you didn't show it. You smiled and laughed, and made them all wonder how I got so lucky. You were absolutely flawless." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then showed her the screen. Already, social media was exploding with photos from the club opening. #KimMinwoo was trending. Most of the photos featured Tiana, her smile, her dress, the way she'd held herself with confidence and grace. "Soul's obsessed with you," Minwoo said, something like pride in his voice. "The mysterious foreign wife who appeared out of nowhere. They're calling you beautiful, elegant, sophisticated." Tiana scrolled through the comments, most in Korean but some in English. The general consensus seemed to be that Kim Minwoo had excellent taste, and where had he been hiding this gorgeous woman? The car climbed up into the hills, heading home. Minwoo's arms stayed wrapped around her the entire way, one hand playing with her hair, the other still resting possessively on her thigh. "Minwoo," Tiana said quietly as they pulled through the gates. She lifted her head to look at him, her heart pounding. "When we get home, I don't want to sleep in the guest room tonight." His eyes went dark, pupils dilating. "Tiana, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she interrupted. "I want to. I want." She swallowed hard. "I want to be your wife." "Really?" The car had barely stopped before Minwoo was opening the door, lifting her into his arms like she weighed nothing, carrying her into the house and up the stairs while she clung to his shoulders and laughed at the romance novel ridiculousness of it all. But her laughter died when he kicked open the door to the master suite, his suite, and set her down carefully in the middle of the room. Moonlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a space that was all dark masculinity. Charcoal walls, black marble floors, a massive bed with midnight-colored linens. Everything about it screamed power and control. Minwoo stood a few feet away, giving her space, his hands clenched at his sides like he was physically restraining himself. "We can stop," he said, voice rough. "Right now, we can stop. I can walk you back to your room and nothing changes. I won't be angry, won't be disappointed. This is your choice, Tiana. Always your choice." His voice was steady, controlled, but his eyes were burning with barely restrained want. Tiana thought about the girl she'd been yesterday morning. The one who made herself small, who apologized for taking up space, who believed she had to earn love and affection through service and sacrifice. And she thought about who she wanted to be. Powerful, desired, chosen. She reached behind her back and slowly unzipped the black dress, letting it pool at her feet. She stood before him in nothing but black lace and the diamond choker and heels. Minwoo made a sound low in his throat, almost a growl. "Tayana, I'm choosing this," she said, surprised by how steady her voice was. "I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us." Whatever restraint Minwoo had been exercising snapped. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands tangling in her hair, his mouth claiming hers with a hunger that stole her breath. He kissed her like he was drowning and she was air, backing her against the wall, his body pressed against every inch of hers. When his lips left her mouth to trail fire down her neck, she gasped and arched into him. "Tell me if you want to stop," he murmured against her skin, his hands already working at the clasp of her bra. "At any point, just say the word." But stopping was the last thing on Tayana's mind. He carried her to the bed, laying her down on silk sheets that felt cool against her overheated skin. The moonlight painted him in silver and shadow as he stripped off his jacket, his shirt, revealing a body that was all lean muscle and old scars that told stories of violence survived. When he settled over her, skin finally meeting skin, Tayana wrapped her legs around his waist and pulled him closer. "You're sure?" he asked one more time, his forehead pressed to hers. "I'm sure," she whispered. "I'm yours." "And I'm yours," Minwoo said fiercely. Then he kissed her again and showed her exactly what it meant to be married to the most dangerous man in Seoul. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Tayana's head on Minwoo's chest, his fingers trailing up and down her spine in lazy patterns that made her shiver. "Can I ask you something?" Tayana said quietly. "Anything. The scar through your eyebrow. How did you get it?" Minwoo was quiet for a long moment. "Knife fight when I was 19, he finally said. "First time I killed a man. He was one of my father's rivals, sent to kill me as a message. I was barely trained, operating on instinct and fear. He gave me this," he touched the scar, "and I gave him a permanent retirement." Tayana processed that. "Does it bother you? That I know what you've done?" "It should," she admitted. "A normal person would be terrified. But somehow, I'm not. Is that wrong?" His arms tightened around her. "It means you understand that the world isn't black and white. That survival sometimes requires difficult choices." They were quiet for a while, just breathing together, hearts gradually slowing. "Tayana," Minwoo said. Tomorrow, there's going to be a meeting. Neutral ground. Park Jin-ho, the head of the Choi Syndicate, has requested a sit-down after tonight's message. He's rattled. He wants to negotiate terms." Tayana lifted her head. "Will you go?" "I have to," Minwoo said. "But you're coming with me." "Me? Why?" "Because they need to see you," he said. "They need to see us together. Unified, unbreakable. They need to understand that I'm not just some bachelor they can eliminate cleanly anymore. I have a wife. A legacy to protect. Stakes that change the entire game." Fear flickered in Tayana's chest. What if something goes wrong? What if they try something? "They won't," Minwoo said with absolute certainty. "Not at a neutral meeting. It would start a full-scale war that no one can afford." "But," his hand slid to her nape, "you need to be strong. Jin-ho will try to intimidate you, test you, maybe make comments about you being foreign. You can't flinch." "How will I know when to speak?" Minwoo's lips curved. "I'll touch your knee under the table. That's your signal. Otherwise, just sit beside me and look like you belong there." "Because you do." Tayana nodded against his chest. "Okay, I can do that." "I know you can," Minwoo murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. "My brave, beautiful wife." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Tayana felt safer than she had in years. The meeting was set for noon at a private tea house in Bukshin Hanok Village, one of Seoul's traditional neighborhoods where old Korea still existed among the modern chaos. Hanok houses with their distinctive curved roofs and wooden beams lined narrow alleys that had existed for centuries. Mrs. Kong had dressed Tayana in a tailored dress that drew inspiration from traditional hanbok, but with modern lines. Deep crimson silk, with subtle embroidery, elegant and powerful. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek bun. The diamond choker from last night rested against her throat, along with matching earrings. Minwoo had chosen the outfit himself, his eyes lingering on her as he fastened a jade naragi ornament at her waist. "You look like an empress," he'd said. then kissed her until her carefully applied lipstick was ruined and she had to start over. In the car on the way to Buckshin, Minwoo briefed her one final time. Park Jin-ho is old school, he said, his thumb stroking her knuckles where their hands were linked. Late 50s, traditional values, believes women should be decorative and silent. He hates losing face more than he hates losing money. He'll definitely try to rattle you. How? Comments about your race, your foreignness, maybe suggestions that I married you as some kind of publicity stunt. He might speak over you, dismiss you, look at you like you're not worth acknowledging. Minwoo's jaw tightened. I need you to not react, to stay calm and poised. Can you do that? Tiana thought about growing up black in suburban Atlanta, about the microaggressions and outright racism she'd navigated her entire life, about moving to Korea and dealing with being fetishized and exoticized, and sometimes treated like a curiosity instead of a person. I've dealt with worse than some old gangster trying to make me feel small, she said. I can handle him. Pride flashed in Minwoo's eyes. That's my girl. The tea house was beautiful, a traditional wooden structure tucked away in a quiet alley. Security swept the area first, both Minwoo's men and presumably Jin-ho's, all pretending not to notice each other. When they entered the private room, Park Jin-ho was already there. He was exactly as Minwoo had described, late 50s, silver hair slicked back, wearing a traditional hanbok that probably cost more than most cars. His face was all hard lines and suspicious eyes. 3 men stood behind him like statues, clearly enforcers. Jin-ho rose when they entered, bowing just barely enough to be polite. Calculated disrespect in the depth of the bow. Kim Minwoo SSI, he said, his tone flat. And this must be your wife. The pause before wife was deliberate, loaded with skepticism. Minwoo's hand settled on the small of Tiana's back, guiding her to sit on the cushion across from Jin-ho. He sat beside her, close enough that their legs touched, presenting a united front. Thank you for agreeing to meet, Minwoo said, his tone perfectly neutral. Jin-ho gestured to the tea service laid out between them. Tea was poured with ritual precision, the kind of ceremony that spoke of old traditions and unspoken rules. They all sipped in silence for a long moment. Your marriage surprised many people, Jin-ho finally said, his eyes flicking to Tiana and then away, as if she weren't worth sustained attention. Very sudden. Very convenient timing. Love often is, Minwoo replied smoothly. Jin-ho made a small sound that might have been skepticism. A foreign wife. That's a bold choice. Some might even say reckless. Under the table, Tiana felt Minwoo's hand settle on her knee. The signal. She met Jin-ho's eyes directly, letting herself smile slightly. Some people might say that marrying for love instead of strategic alliance is reckless, she said in perfect Korean, her accent still present, but her grammar flawless. Others would call it strength, knowing what you want and taking it. The room went silent. Jin-ho's men shifted minutely, hands moving closer to where weapons were probably concealed. Minwoo's fingers tightened on her knee, not warning, encouraging. Jin-ho set his teacup down with deliberate care. And do you love him, Mrs. Kim? He asked, his tone condescending. This man who marries women he meets in street tents? Or are you just another transaction in his business empire? The insult was clear. Tiana felt rage bubble up, not at being called a transaction, but at the dismissive way this man looked at her, like she was disposable, decorative, unimportant. She leaned forward slightly. I married a man who saw my value when no one else did, she said quietly, her voice steady. A man who protects what's his. A man who wins. She paused, letting that sink in. You attacked his warehouses last night. You lost 3 of your best lieutenants. And here you are, drinking his tea in a neutral location, asking for terms of surrender disguised as negotiation. She tilted her head. Tell me, Mr. Park, who's really being reckless here? Jin-ho stared at her for a long, tense moment. The air in the room felt electric, dangerous, like lightning about to strike. Then, slowly, his expression shifted. The dismissiveness faded, replaced by something like grudging respect. You have fire, he said finally. Good. You'll need it, married to this one. He gestured at Minwoo. Minwoo's hand slid higher on Tiana's thigh under the table, possessive and proud. Jin-ho turned his full attention to Minwoo. Terms, he said flatly. They negotiated for nearly an hour. Territories were redrawn, percentages adjusted, supply chains rerouted. Jinho conceded more ground than he gained, but he maintained enough face to walk away without looking completely defeated. When the agreements were finalized, Jinho stood. "I'll honor these terms," he said. "But understand, if you show weakness, if your position falters even slightly, I'll be there to take everything." Minwoo rose as well, pulling Tiana up beside him. "And if you test these boundaries even once," he said calmly, "you won't live long enough to regret it." They bowed to each other, a formal acknowledgement of the temporary truce. As Jinho and his men filed out, Tiana finally allowed herself to exhale. The moment the door closed, Minwoo pulled her into his arms. "You were incredible," he murmured against her hair. "Absolutely incredible. The way you stood up to him, the way you defended our position." He pulled back to look at her, eyes burning with pride and something darker, more heated. "I have never been more proud of anyone in my life." Then he kissed her, right there in the traditional tea house, and Tiana felt power surge through her veins. She wasn't just Minwoo's wife anymore. She was Mrs. Kim, and Mrs. Kim didn't back down from anyone. 6 months later, spring had transformed Seoul into a wonderland of cherry blossoms. The trees lining the streets of Pyeongchangdong were heavy with pink blooms that drifted through the air like snow. Tiana stood on the terrace of the mansion, one hand resting gently on the swell of her belly. 5 months pregnant with a boy, according to the doctor. 5 months since she'd discovered she was carrying Minwoo's child, and the entire underworld had adjusted its calculations yet again. An heir. A legacy. Another complication that made Minwoo's position even stronger. She heard footsteps behind her and smiled even before Minwoo's arms wrapped around her from behind, his hands settling over hers on her stomach. "Thinking again?" he asked, his lips brushing her neck in the way that still made her shiver. "About the Pojangmaka," Tiana admitted. "About that night. I was so broken, Minwoo. So completely shattered." He turned her gently in his arms, his expression soft in a way reserved only for her. "And now?" She smiled up at him. This dangerous, powerful man who'd married her on a whim and somehow become her everything. "Now I'm whole," she said. "Now I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Minwoo dropped to his knees right there on the terrace, pressing his lips to her belly, to their son growing inside her. "And soon," he whispered to the baby, "you'll help us rule all of this." Tiana threaded her fingers through his hair, looking out over Seoul spread below them like a glittering kingdom. Her kingdom now. Hers and Minwoo's, and soon their sons. She thought about the scared girl drinking soju alone in a street tent, crying over a man who'd never valued her. That girl felt like a stranger now. In her place stood Mrs. Kim Minwoo, wife of Seoul's undisputed underground king, mother to its future heir, a woman who'd learned to navigate a world of shadows and violence with grace and power. She'd been weak once. Overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. Never again. "I love you," she said softly, and Minwoo looked up at her with such fierce devotion that it stole her breath. "I love you," he replied, standing to kiss her properly. "My unexpected wife. My perfect queen." The city sprawled below them, Seoul in all its complicated glory. Their empire, built on a foundation of shattered champagne bottles and midnight ceremonies. Built on pain transformed into power. Built on a love that had started as strategy and become something real and unshakable. And they would rule it together. Forever. The end. Thank you so much for staying with this incredible journey from heartbreak to power, from betrayal to true love. If this story gave you all the feels, please hit that like button, drop a comment telling me your favorite moment, and subscribe for more dramatic, romantic, emotional stories. What did you think of Tiana's transformation? Of Minwoo? Let me know in the comments. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Until next time, remember, you're stronger than you think, and sometimes the best revenge is becoming the person you were always meant to be. See you in the next story.